everybody, welcome. All right, so we are going to get into chapter 9, which takes us to part 2 of the text. Now, if you are reading along with me, you are going to realize that for this part of the text, Sophie is now 18 years old. When we left her at chapter 8, she was 12 years old. So we have an unaccounted period of 6 years to really ponder, right? So we are going to be seeing the developments. So we're picking up at 18 years old. All right, so let's get into chapter 9. I was 18 and going to start college in the fall. My mother continued working her 2 jobs. She put in even longer hours. And we moved to a one-family house in a tree-lined neighborhood near where Mark lived. In the new place, my mother had a patch of land in the back where she started growing hibiscus. Daffodils would need more care, and she had grown tired of them. We decorated our new living room in red, everything from the carpet to the plastic roses on the coffee table. I had my very own large bedroom with a new squeaky bed. My mother's room was even bigger, with a closet that you could have entertained some friends in. In some places in Haiti, her closet would have been a room on its own, and the clothes would not have bothered the fortunate child who would sleep in it. Before the move, I had been going to a Haitian Adventist school that went from elementary right to high school. They had guaranteed my mother that they would get me into college, and they had lived up to their pledge. Now my first classes at college were a few months away, and my mother couldn't have been happier. Her sacrifices had paid off. I never said this to my mother, but I hated the Maranatha Bilingual Institution. It was as if I had never left Haiti. All the lessons were in French, except for English composition and literature classes. Outside the school, we were the Frenchies, cringing in our mock Catholic school uniforms, as the students from the public school across the street called us boat people and stinking Haitians. When my mother was home, she made me read out loud from the English composition textbooks. There were words that I heard often, words that jump out of New York Creole conversations, like the last kernel in a cooling popcorn machine. Words, among others, like TV, building, feeling, which Mark and my mother used even when they were in the middle of a heated political discussion in Creole. Moing feeling. I have a feeling Haiti will get back on its feet one day, but I'll be dead before it happens. My mother always the pessimist. There were other words that helped too, words that looked almost the same in French, but were pronounced differently in English. Nationality, alien, race, enemy, date, present. These and other words gave me a context for the rest that I did not understand. Eventually, I began to hear myself that I read better. I answered swiftly when my mother asked me a question in English. Not that I ever had a chance to show it off at school, but I became an English speaker. There is great responsibility that comes with knowledge, my mother would say. My great responsibility was to study hard. I spent 6 years doing nothing but that: school, home, and prayer. Tantati once said that love is like rain. It comes in a drizzle sometimes. Then it starts pouring, and if you're not careful, it will drown you. I was 18, and I fell in love. His name was Joseph, and he was old. He was old like God is old to me, ever present and full of wisdom. He looked somewhat like Monsieur Augustin. He was the color of ground coffee, with a cropped beard and a voice like molasses that turned to music when he held a saxophone to his lips. He broke the monotony of my shuffle between home and school when he moved into the empty house next door to ours. My mother never trusted him. In the back of my mind echoed her constant warning, "You keep away from those American boys." The ones whose eyes followed me on the street. The ones who were supposedly drooling over me afterwards, even though they called me nasty West Indian to my face. You keep away from them especially. They are upset because they cannot have you. Aside from Mark, we knew no other men. Men were as mysterious to me as white people, who in Haiti we had only known as missionaries. I tried to imagine my mother's reaction to Joseph. I could already hear her, not if he were the last unmarried man on earth. When she came home during the day and saw him sitting on his porch steps next door, she would nod a quick hello and walk faster. She wrapped her arms tighter around me as though to rescue me from his stare. Somehow, early on, I felt that he might like me. The way his eyes trailed me up the block gave him away. My mother liked to say, "I admire priests because they like women for more than their faces and their buttocks," though not all priests are that way. Joseph looked like the kind of man who would buy a girl a meal without asking for her bra in return. Whenever I went to his stoop, I felt like we were conspiring. How could I smile without my mother noticing? And how could he respond to her brisk hello and mine too, without letting her see that wink that was for me alone? At night, I fantasized that he was sitting somewhere pining away, dreaming about me, thinking of a way to enter my life. Then one day, like rain, he came to my front door. I was stretched out on the couch with a chemistry book when I heard the knock. I looked through the security peephole to check. It was him. "Can I use your phone?" he asked. "I've had mine disconnected because I'm going out of town soon." I opened the door and led him to the phone. Our fingers touched as I handed it to him. He dialed quickly, smiling with his eyes on my face. "Did we get it?" he asked into the phone. His feet bounced off the ground when he heard the answer. "Yes!" he shouted. "Yes!" He handed me back the phone with a wink. "Have you ever really wanted something and gotten it?" he asked. My face must have been blank. He asked the question again, then suddenly slapped his forehead. I haven't even introduced myself. "My name is Sophie," I said, jumping ahead. "I'm Joseph," he said. I knew. "Was it good news you just got? What gave me away?" He looked at me as though he was waiting for me to say something equally witty. I wasn't as glib, as fast on my feet. I couldn't think of anything. "It was good news," he answered. "I just found out that we got a gig in the East Village from now until our tour starts." "A gig? A job? I'm a musician." "I know," I said. "Sometimes I hear you playing at night. Does it bother you?" "No. It's very pretty." "I detect an accent," he said. "Oh, please, say a small one," I thought. After years in this country, I was tired of having people detect my accent. I wanted to sound completely American, especially for him. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Haiti." "Ah," he said. "I've never been there. Do you speak Creole?" "Oui, oui," I ventured for a laugh. "Oui, oui." He pointed to me and him. We have something in common. Mwe asui. I speak a form of Creole too. I'm from Louisiana. My parents consider themselves what we call Creoles. Is it a small world or what? I shook my head. Yes, it was a very small world. You live alone? He asked. My mother's constant suspicion prodded me, and I quickly said no, just in case he was thinking of coming over tonight to kill me. This was New York after all. You could not trust anybody. I live with my mother. I have seen her, he said. She works. Nights. Sometimes. Did you two just move here? Yes, we did. I thought so, he said. Whenever I'm in New York, I sublet in the neighborhood, and I have never seen you walking around before. We moved about a year ago. That's about the last time I was in Brooklyn. Where are you the rest of the year? In Providence. I was immediately fascinated by the name. Providence. Fate. A town named for the Creator, the Almighty. Who would not want to live there? I'm away from my house about 6 months out of the year, he said. I travel to different places with my band, and then after a while, I go back home for some peace and quiet. What is it like in Providence? I asked. It is calm. I can drive to the river and watch the sunset. I think you would like it there. You seem like a deep, thoughtful kind of person. I am. I like that in people. I like that very much. He glanced down at his feet as though he couldn't think of anything else to say. I wanted to ask him to stay, but my mother would be home soon. I work at home, he said, in case you ever want to drop by. I spent the whole week with my ear pressed against the wall, listening to him rehearse. He rehearsed day and night, sometimes 10 to 12 hours without stopping. Sometimes at night, the saxophone was like a soothing lullaby. One afternoon, he came by with a ham and cheese sandwich to thank me for letting him use the phone. He sat across from me in the living room while I ate very slowly. What are you going to study in college? He asked. I think I'm going to be a doctor. You think? Is it something you like? I suppose. My mother says it's important for us to have a doctor in the family. What if you don't want to be a doctor? There's a difference between what a person wants and what's good for them. You sound like you're quoting someone. My mother. What would Sophie like to do? He asked. That was the problem. Sophie really wasn't sure. I had never really dared to dream on my own. You're not sure, are you? He even understood my silences. It is okay not to have your future on a map, he said. That way you can flow wherever life takes you. That is not Haitian, I said. That's very American. What is? Being a wanderer, the very idea. I'm not American, he said. I am African American. What's the difference? The African. It means that you and I, we are already part of each other. I think I blushed. At least I nearly choked on my sandwich. He walked over and tapped my back. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said, still short of breath. I think you're a fine woman, he said. I started choking again. I knew what my mother would think of me going over there during the day. A good girl would never be alone with a man, an older one at that. I wasn't thinking straight. It was nice waking up in the morning knowing I had someone to talk to. I started going next door every day. The living room was bare except for a couch and a few boxes, packed in a corner near his synthesizer and loudspeakers. At first, I would sit on the linoleum and listen to him play. Then slowly, I moved closer until sometimes he would let me touch the keyboard, guiding my fingers with his hand on top of mine. Between strokes, I learned the story of his life. He was from a middle-class New Orleans family. His parents died when he was young. He was on his own by the time he was 15. He went to college in Providence, but by his sophomore year, he left school and bought a house there. He was lucky he had been left enough money to pursue his dreams of being a musician. He liked to play slave songs, spirituals, both on his saxophone and his piano, slowing them down or speeding them up at different tempos. One day, he would move back to Providence for good and write his own songs. I told him about Croix de Rosettes, the Augustans, and Danticat. They would make a great song, he said. He had been to Jamaica, Cuba, and Brazil several times, trying to find links between the spirituals and Latin and island music. We went to a Haitian record store on North Strand Avenue. He bought a few albums and we ate lunch every day, listening to the drum and conch shell beats. I'm going to marry you, he said at lunch one day, even though I already know the problems that will arise. Your mother will pass a watermelon over it because I'm too old. Ever since we had become friends, I stopped thinking of him as old. He talked young and acted young. As far as I was concerned, he could have been my age, but with more nurtured kindness, as Danticat liked to say. You're not very old, I told him. Not very old, huh? Age doesn't matter. Only the young can say that. I am not sure your mother will agree. We won't have to tell her. She can tell I'm old just by looking at me. How old are you? Old, older than you. One day when I was in his house, I sneaked a peek at his driver's license and saw the year he was born. He was my mother's age, maybe a month or two younger. They say men look distinguished when they get old, I said. Easy for you to say. I believe in the young at heart. That's a very mature thing to say. It was always sad to leave him at night. I wanted to go to hear him play with his band, but I was afraid of what my mother would think. He knocked on my door very late one night. My mother was away, working the whole night. I came out and found him sitting on the steps out front. He still had on his black tuxedo, which he had worn to work. He brought me some posters of the legends who were his idols, Charlie Bird Parker and Miles Davis. Sophie should have heard me tonight, he said. I was so hot, you could have fried a plantain on my face. We both laughed loudly, drawing glares from people passing by. Can you go out to eat? He asked. Somewhere, anywhere. I'm so high from the way I played. Don't let me down. I called my mother at the old lady's house on the pretense that I was wishing her a good night. Then we drove to the Café des Arts on Long Island, which was always open late, Joseph said. I drank my first cappuccino with a drop of rum. We shared a tiny cup. He was worried about driving back and finding my mother at home waiting for me. He told me to raise my head through the roof of his convertible as we sped on the freeway, hurrying to make it home before sunrise. I felt like I was high enough to wash my hair in a cloud and have a star in my mouth. I am being irresponsible, he said. Your mother will have me arrested Thank God you're over 18. He held my hand on the doorstep, swaying my pinky back and forth. You do wonders for my English, I said, hoping it wasn't too forward. You're such a beautiful woman, he said. You think I'm a woman? You're the first person who has called me that. In that sad case, everyone else is blind. I leaned my head on his shoulder as we watched the morning sky lighten. Can you tell I like you? He asked. I can tell. Do you like me? You will not respect me if I say yes, I said. He threw back his head and laughed. Where do you get such notions? How do I know you're not just saying these things so you can get what you want? What do you think I want? He asked. What all men want. Which is? I don't want to say it. You will have to say it. What is it? Life? Liberty? The pursuit of happiness? He quickly let go of my hand. I'm not about that. I'm older than that. I'm not going to say I'm better than that because I'm not a priest. But I'm not about that. Then what do you want with me? I asked. The pursuit of happiness. Are you asking me to be with you? Yes. No. It's not the way you think. Let's just go to sleep, solitaire, separately. Fare thee well. Good night. He waited for me to go inside. I locked the door behind me. I heard him playing his keyboard as I lay awake in bed. The notes and scales were like raindrops, teardrops, torrents. I felt the music rise and surge, tightening every muscle in my body. Then I relaxed, letting it go, feeling a rush that I knew I wasn't supposed to.